Good evening, everybody. My name is Megan Torrey. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the World Affairs Council of Connecticut. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here tonight with the Consul General of Mexico and the Consul General of Canada. I do want to recognize a few people in the audience.
No one between them?
Not even the U.S. flag is in there. So I want to recognize our chairman, Peter Kelly, who is joining us. We're so happy to have you with us tonight, Peter. Some of you might know that Peter recently relocated to Texas, which is just monumental, and we're so happy to have him here. I also wanted to recognize our honorary Consul General of Romania to the state of Connecticut, Dana Buchin, and our brand new Vice Consul of Peru to Hartford, Adriana Ayala. So this is a very special night to have representatives from Canada and Mexico with us. Consul General Fierro, I do want to express our condolences for the loss of your sailors over the weekend. As someone who has had the opportunity to represent our U.S. Navy here in the state of Connecticut, I know what it means to wear the uniform, and so we offer our sincerest condolences. In Consul General Clark, it's an extreme honor because I grew up in a multi-generational, multilingual French-Canadian household. So, although my French-Canadian that I learned from my bickering grandparents is not for public consumption.
We'll see. I'll get you speaking French.
So it really is a true honor to have you with us. Oh, no. Because I think we're taping it, and those moments will live forever on And so in honor, we have some Mexican and some Canadian food for everybody, and I hope that you enjoyed that.
Thank you.
By way of introductions, Consul General Fierro is a career diplomat who previously served as the head of the Cultural Institute of the Mexican Embassy in Washington, D.C., which I've had the honor to visit, which is truly amazing. He was the Consul General of Mexico in Orlando, Florida, in St. Paul, Minnesota, and at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he served as the Director General for Education and Cultural Cooperation and Deputy Director General for North America. And Consul General Clark, prior to your service in being appointed Consul General in New York, you served as chair of Global Public Affairs, and you were also one of the most respected broadcast journalists in Canada. And during your 45-year career, you were posted as bureau chief to Washington, in China, and actively, and worked in over 30 countries, and actively reported from 8 active war zones. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So we know that the world is a tumultuous place these days, with news breaking all of the time, in particular with our closest allies, neighbors, and friends, Mexico and Canada. So I thought we could begin the discussion tonight with baselining where we are with our relationship. So I'll start with you, Consul General Fierro. How would you characterize the current state of the Mexican relationship with the U.S.?
Well, as you all know, Mexico has been the last 2 years the first trading partner of the U.S. So President Sheinbaum has insisted all these months the importance and need of collaboration in all the issues that we have and that we share together with the U.S. Migration, security, drugs, and obviously trade. So it's been a complex time, but as you might have read and heard, President Sheinbaum has been saying, let's have our head very cold and let's negotiate. We need to continue being partners, North American partners that we have been the last 30 years.
Well, thank you all, first of all, for having me here tonight. This is a terrific opportunity, and I'm enjoying it already. Consul General, I just want to say on behalf of Canada how sad we are at the tragic loss of those lives in the Kautamuk ship, and we extend to you and to all Mexicans our deepest sympathies for this. To answer your question where we are, I guess the baseline is simply this, is that Canada is the biggest buyer of American goods and services anywhere in the world. We are larger than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined in terms of what we buy from the United States. It's a relationship, if you look at the national picture, of over $1 trillion a year between Canada and the United States. On any given day, there's $2.5 billion that goes back and forth across the border, and 400,000 people. Now, a lot of those 400,000 people that go back and forth every single day are actually family. It's not just business people or tourists going over. It is built up over 200 years, this close friendship that we have, and then bringing it down to the state level in Connecticut. There are some 35,000 people here who work in Connecticut who work for Canadian companies. We're deeply involved in the life in Connecticut. And so, I mean, literally, when Connecticut does well, we do well because, we're investors here. We're part of your community. So that's where we start, and I think because of the depth of our connection with the United States and Connecticut, what has happened over the last little while has been even more deeply felt on the part of Canadians.
So let's talk about tariffs and trade, because this is what is on everybody's mind. So we'll start, how does both Canada and Mexico view U.S. tariff strategies under the current administration? And can we talk a little bit about, are there specific tariffed goods or sectors that are causing the most friction? We'll start with you, Consul General Fierro.
Okay. We do, well, the first thing is we think that among partners, it's not nice to begin with tariffs. It is a kind of tax on population. The tariffs end making things costlier. So yes, Mexico has not been in favor of tariffs, but we insist that as partners and allies with a North American vision, the USMCA, the old NAFTA, the new NAFTA, the USMCA, doesn't have those tariffs. So at the beginning, when we both got the 25 without negotiation, it was freaking for everyone, obviously. But now it's clear that whatever is produced in Mexico under USMCA for now does not have tariffs. So what we have seen is that there is a negotiation, and we've seen that the current administration has seen tariffs as a way to pressure the agenda with Mexico in different sectors and different products. One of them, the automotive industry. Well, it's so complicated. I'm sure you're going to talk more about it, but a Mexican car bought today here has 65% is American. To know how to put tariffs on those pieces is going to be very, very complicated. So that we're worried. We're worried about, for example, right now, the threat of the 21% tariff on tomatoes starting on July, when we are the most important producer of tomatoes, and 70% of tomatoes that are bought in the U.S. Come from Mexico. So that would make tomatoes very expensive for Americans too. So that's kind of like what we see. But we hope that with the tomato, it's been 30 years of a dispute. It has to do with protectionism, and we still hope that there will be room for negotiation.
Well, we make some pretty fine damn tomatoes too up in Canada. Here's where we stand on tariffs, and I know we're going to get to sovereignty later on. So I'll just talk about tariffs. In a word, they're unjustified, and that is our position. There is no need for this. This is, prior to this, 99% of everything that went back and forth across the U.S.-Canada border was tariff-free. 99%, and seemed to be working pretty well. As the Consul General from Mexico said, are these tariffs being used not because they want to attack a product or change the nature of a product, but for some other purpose? Probably. And we recognize that. But, I think that here's where I want to get into agreement with some sentiments in the U.S. The U.S. says that, or at least according to the White House, I should say, it says that they want to make America great again. They want to make this the powerhouse of the world. They want to make it safe. They want to make it secure. You know what? We have no disagreement with any of that. But what we're saying is, if you want to be great, if you want to be the powerhouse of the world, use us. We're here to help. We've got the stuff that you need. The road to American goals, that road goes right through Canada, and probably a lot of it goes through Mexico as well. And we've got a once-in-a-generation, maybe even once-in-a-10-generation opportunity to build the most dynamic economic unit in the history of the world, and it's called North America. And history is calling us right now to do this. Tariffs are just getting in the way of what should be inevitable in history. Think of what we could do. Think of what we could do if we did this together. And not just on the numbers, but also on the emotional side. Can you imagine if everybody bought into one idea? How big and powerful that would be, and how it would lift society. It would lift people out of poverty. It would give opportunities to people. It would allow dreams to actually come true for young people. So when I look at tariffs, I say, what the hell are we doing? This is just dumb. The Wall Street Journal called it the dumbest trade war in the history of the world. We tend to agree with the Wall Street Journal, which we don't always do. But in this case, we're in violent agreement with the Wall Street Journal.
So we talked a little bit about cars and car manufacturing. Some things that we're hearing in the news here in the U.S. are, places like Ford are going to move their factories back to the U.S. Is this what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly on the automotive side, and the Consul General worded it quite well. A car that you see on the street here anywhere in Connecticut, parts of that car have probably gone back and forth across the Canadian and the Mexican border a minimum of 7 times before that car was put together. So is it an American car? Is it a Canadian car? Is it a Mexican car? Who knows? It's a North American car because that's the way the industry has been built. So when we're getting 25% tariffs, I can tell you this is having a very immediate effect in Canada. Thousands of people are being thrown out of work as we speak, as we're sitting here tonight. Shops are being boarded up. Investments. Honda has pulled a $15 billion investment out of Canada as a result of the tariffs. You can imagine what that meant to the town that was about to get that investment. So yeah, it's having a devastating effect already on us, and that's just on cars. We got steel and aluminum at 25%, and we've got 25% on, and this is going to sound really nerdy, and I'll try and stay out of being nerdy, but on non-USMCA compliant stuff is also 25%. And then we've got the sort of Damocles hanging over us for July about everything from softwood lumber to pharmaceuticals and God knows what else. So I guess what I'm saying very simply is we're not feeling any relief from the tariff war at all.
How is it impacting Mexico?
Well, a lot of the investments have been also put on hold, And there are rumors, for example, that Nissan in Aguascalientes will stop investing in a new plant that it was thinking of doing. But it still hasn't happened. And I was reading this on my way here, a note from Larry Rubin, an American in Mexico, the president of an American society, saying that it's almost impossible for the American economy to create all the jobs that are of all the manufacturing things that are done in Mexico, for example. So it's not realistic that from one day to the other, those huge investments can come to the U.S. And also labor is there's not enough labor in the U.S. and very expensive labor. So it sounds very easy, but we think it's a lot more complex than that. But for the time being, a lot of investments. This nearshoring that had been a process spoken in Mexico a lot, that Mexico would have an important role versus Asian economies. Right now, with all this uncertainty, there are a lot of investments are not happening yet.
So let's talk about how your nations are reacting, right? So how are policymakers in your countries, both Canada and Mexico, looking to protect your national economies from the impact of tariff instability? And I know that both President Sheinbaum and Prime Minister Carney had a call last week, right? So what are they doing? What's happening on that end?
Okay. I'll jump in. So what are we doing? Yes, President Sheinbaum and Prime Minister Carney had a call. It was a very good call. And really what we did is reaffirmed each other's commitment to the idea that the USMCA renegotiation is going to remain a three-country deal. It will be a trilateral deal, not a bilateral deal between two countries. That was number one. In some senses, how are we protecting? We're doing two things. And then I'll have a quick word about the mood of the Canadian people. In some sense, this has been good for Canada. Now, don't misunderstand or take me out of context on this one. But what has made it good is that it has unified my country in a way that I've never seen before. It is now allowing us to do stuff that, quite frankly, we should have done 80 years ago. We have trade and non-trade barriers between provinces in Canada that make absolutely no sense. We have credential recognition problems. Like, you can be a doctor in Manitoba, but you can't step over that border with Saskatchewan and tell somebody to take an aspirin because, no, you can't do that. Well, now we're getting rid of all of that to the point where the new Prime Minister, has said that by July 1st, which happens to be Canada Day, all interprovincial trade barriers will be gone. Now, this is extraordinary. Now, it requires the help of the provinces as well as the federal government, but province after province after province is coming on board and saying, yep, the time is right, we got to do this now. So this is really brought us together in an extraordinary way. So that's the good stuff. The mood of Canada required, however, that the government take some action. And so we did put retaliatory tariffs on because there had to be a response. We just couldn't sit there and take it. In reality, we're 1/10 the size of the United States. We can't go toe-to-toe with American tariffs. But we can, as we have said, try and inflict pain in very precise places, mainly perhaps in districts that overwhelmingly voted for President Trump. Maybe we put 100% tariff on bourbon, which we did. But, we don't want to do this. We don't want to be here. Final word is the mood of the Canadian people. I've never seen anything like it. Politically, what happened was it turned our politics upside down in a matter of weeks. I'm sure most of you know that. That the one party that had a 25-point lead in the opinion polls all of a sudden lost the election in a matter of weeks because it became the election about Donald Trump. And it became Canadians feeling, and I know we're going to get into the sovereignty issue, but that was an accelerant poured on the fire. That when you feel that you're under attack, when your very country is at stake, you do things as a people that are not directed by government, but are organic in what you do. And I'm sure all of you know, the provinces, because we sell liquor in provincial liquor stores in Canada. Well, there's no more American liquor or wine in Canadian stores. In grocery stores, people are, when they walk in, are urged to buy Canadian, and the American products are generally put upside down on the shelves, so you know which are Americans. This is not stuff that we're doing as a government. Let me underline that. This is stuff that happens when people feel that they're under attack. And so against that background, the one thing that gets lost in a crisis is nuance. And the challenge for policymakers is to find nuance in a crisis. And I think that's the stage that we're at now. We're trying to find, how do we go ahead? How do we not normalize this, because there's nothing normal about this, but how do we get around this? How do we get over this? And to do that, you've got to be smarter than just hitting the other guy over the head with a hammer as well. So we've moved from stage 1 to stage 2.
Also very similar but different in Mexico. We've always had a love-hatred relationship with the U.S. We've always wanted to be like the U.S., knowing that it's not that easy. And President Trump has never thought of Mexico as the 53rd state, not even Baja California, because we're a little darker than expected. But yeah. But there is, for example, President Sheinbaum has received something that no president in Mexico had 80% of support since this administration began. And she has come up with the Plan Mexico, which is a program to strengthen Mexico's internal market, reduce dependency on imports, increase national production, promote nearshoring, and enhance scientific development. And there are actions in sectors like pharma, medical devices, agro-industry, semiconductors. And there's the idea of, like in Canada, buy Mexico first, which is important in this moment, but at the same time, it's sad when we had been buying North America products and being very proud of doing so. But this has been the strategy.
So we all know that these issues of trade and tariffs are deeply intertwined with the issues of national security. So on February 1, President Trump declared a national emergency due to the claims of illicit drugs and illegal migration at the northern and southern borders. Using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, he announced 25% tariffs on all goods from Canada and Mexico, although I think that was reneged the next day. But Consul General Clark, can you give us your response to the claim that there is an emergency on the border between US and Canada? What's the current state of the border?
It's nonsense. It's complete and utter nonsense. I mean, I can give you the numbers. I think this year less than a pound of fentanyl has been designated so-called Canadian fentanyl. I want to be brief, so I'm just going to delve into this for a second. Fentanyl, any fentanyl found within 100 miles of the Canadian border is considered Canadian fentanyl. This applied even to 2 people who drove up from Phoenix and were caught in Spokane, Washington, with a car full of fentanyl, and it was designated as fentanyl that had come from Canada. Overall, look, we are in complete agreement with the White House and with most Americans that if we could wave a magic wand and get rid of fentanyl from the face of the planet, we would do it in a heartbeat. We have no trucker trade with fentanyl, with no defense of it. We got to get rid of this stuff. It's awful. In fact, it's hurting Canada on a per capita basis more than it's affecting the United States. It's hollowing out our towns as well. Do we want to get rid of it? You bet we do. Do we want to have a secure border? 100%. We've co-managed this border for over 150 years. It's the envy of the world. And there have always been problems on the border, but they've been jointly managed. In terms of, and I'm hearing stuff from certain quarters and certain representatives and a few senators and a couple of cabinet ministers about, terrorists coming over the border. I think the FBI director said that. Well, listen, again, this is absolute and utter nonsense. The numbers don't bear it out whatsoever. I won't go into a long diatribe about it, but our position is simply this, that we have to make that border more secure than it is. We have to make fentanyl less prevalent than it is. Is any of this a crisis? Absolutely not. Is it something we should do? 100% we should do it. We've already spent $1.5 billion in response to this, saying, okay, we got a couple of Black Hawk helicopters, we got dogs, we got all sorts of stuff, $1.5 billion to spend on it. And what we're finding is that there are more people now trying to sneak into Canada than are trying to sneak into the United States. In terms of bad stuff going across the border, yeah, we think joint management should, yes, get rid of fentanyl. Let's also get rid of the guns that are coming up from the United States into Canada and killing our people. So, listen, overall, this is the best managed border in the world because both countries have paid attention to it. It can always be better. It can always be improved. There are always going to be problems that need to be addressed. Is there an emergency? Is it sort of, people running amok on the northern border? No, 100% not.
Let's talk about Mexico and our southern border.
Well, it has changed very, very much in the last 3 months. Mexico also put 10,000 of its National Guard on the border precisely to help control the movement of people. Numbers have gone down impressively. There are less crossings to the U.S. than in 2020 when the pandemic. So number of deportations up to now are very low too. The numbers are much less than a year ago. I received the reports of the consulates at the border, and the numbers in San Diego, there were returned 30 people today. And because there were thousands of people coming in, there were thousands of people being deported too. So that issue has been very well dealt. As we've said always, collaborating on both sides is how we can resolve the problems that affect us both. Security. Mexico has put a lot of effort into controlling the amount of drugs coming to the U.S. More than 126 tons of drugs have been seized in Mexico in the last 5 months, 1,200 kilograms of fentanyl, plus over 1.5 million fentanyl pills. But we have stressed with the U.S., yes, we have to put a lot of more effort on both sides, but we have to see the problem of fentanyl use as a health issue that has to be dealt also by the U.S. government. And the same thing, as Consul Clark mentioned, 80% of Mexican arms that are in the hands of the criminal organizations come from the U.S. We have heard for the first time, and we are thankful to that President Trump did mention in one of the calls with President Sheinbaum that he is very interested in helping control that. But before that, it has always been a Mexican issue, and we are convinced that criminal organizations will continue being strong if both governments don't work together to control the flow of money and the flow of arms among those things.
Let's continue on the sort of the issue of immigration for a second. So, Consul General Fierro, as Consul General in Boston, what are some of your constituents experiencing? What are some of the most pressing issues when it comes to the current U.S. immigration policy, with the understanding that the U.S. hasn't had comprehensive immigration policy reform right since Ronald Reagan was president, and so we know that there's a lot of changes going on. But what are your constituents here in New England experiencing?
Well, there's 5 million undocumented Mexicans living in the U.S., but 80% of them have been living here for more than 15 years. They pay taxes, they have their ITIN number, they contribute to their societies. And so among them, there's total fear. Fear about not knowing if they can go freely to take their kids to school, if they're having lunch in a restaurant, if in any moment there can be an operation to take them out. All those invitations of self-deportation, or now to register before USCIS, so they will know exactly where you live and have all your biometrical. So there is a lot of fear, but they continue working and they continue contributing to the U.S. Students have a lot of fear. Several of them in Boston had their visas removed without knowing why, and then they came back. And I think we will see what we saw in the first Trump administration, that many Mexican students will start preferring going to study to Canada, to UK, to other countries in Europe.
So what are we seeing in Canada? What are Canadians' most pressing concerns when it comes to U.S. immigration policy? And can I become a Canadian citizen?
We're handing out forms at the back of the room. U.S. immigration policy. I mean, let me just take one step back, Megan, for a second, because I think it's really important in the context of every question I'm answering tonight, is to underline the fact that Canadians really like and admire Americans. We really do. This is not an anti-American thing that's going on in Canada. This is a reaction to one group of people who are doing things that we think are kind of, well, they don't make a lot of sense. In response to your question, so what's happening in immigration? Well, the law of unintended consequences, right? So take a look at academia. I've just come back from talking to a number of universities in the 5 states that I'm responsible for, and some very prestigious world-class institutions. And they are afraid because their researchers and professors are increasingly looking at opportunities either up in Canada or in the EU or in other parts of the world. Now, are we offering incentives? No, not officially. But the incentive is come here and it's nice and stable, and we will, you can carry on your work. So in one sense, we are seeing, we're seeing sort of the beginnings of a reverse brain drain, something that Canada incidentally experienced about 40 years ago when the best and brightest in our country came down to the United States. So it's not Schadenfreude. I mean, we're not thrilled about the turn of events. Very quickly, to the heart of your question, though, how do we feel about immigration policy? We feel that we have got a great agreement with the United States. It's called the Safe Third Country Agreement. And basically what it means is this: if you claim asylum in one country, you can't then go sneak into the other country. You just get returned to the country where you first landed. This has really normalized things. Now, are we worried about a potential mass migration to the north if there's massive deportations? Of course we are. We're very concerned about that. So far, the Safe Third Country Agreement is working. When we return people to the United States, by and large, the United States is respecting that treaty, as we are. Similarly, if people go through the pine trees south and then get returned north, we take them back. So we have less of a problem in terms of mass migration. I mean, we've got some advantages that Mexico does not. We have winter, and we got ice, and we got two oceans on either side and another ocean up top. So we are less vulnerable to mass migration. But for us to think that that couldn't happen to us would be foolish.
So I'm going to switch to talking a little bit about national sovereignty, because recent U.S. rhetoric has been perceived as threatening our neighbors' national sovereignty. And I want to talk about two very specific issues. The first being President Trump's offer to deploy U.S. troops to Mexico. And of course, the second, President Trump's rhetoric suggesting Canada become the 51st U.S. state. So let's start in Mexico. When President Trump offered U.S. troops to deploy to Mexico, President Sheinbaum is quoted as saying, we can work together, but in your territory, in us in ours, and sovereignty is not for sale. How is that being perceived by Mexicans in the Mexican public?
You have to remember that Mexico lost half of its territory to the U.S. in the 1840s, and we were invaded later in 1913. And so there is an absolute, we grew up knowing that we have to defend our sovereignty. And that's why, as President Sheinbaum said, there should not be any unilateral action. There should be all the cooperation needed, but no subordination. And I think that in that sense, we do hope that there will be more and more cooperation. That has been happening for many, many years already in terms of security. But if there is a unilateral action, we're going to get in trouble.
So let's move on to Canada. We know that President Trump has repeatedly discussed Canada becoming a U.S. state, I think even going so far as to call former Prime Minister Trudeau governor. So let's talk about the reactions on the ground in Canada.
Well, where do I start? Little historical basis. Mexico has that fascinating history. We are a country because of the American Revolution. We are all those people who didn't actually see eye to eye with George Washington and moved north, those who were already up north. We had the French fact up north. So we were North America without the American Revolution. And we only went to war once with the United States. And as long as there's no history professors in the room, I can tell you we won. And sorry about burning down the White House. We promise we won't do that again. But that's sort of the context. So, but I think that any country that is told we want to take you over is going to react. You can imagine if somebody said that to America and to Americans. We're going to take you over. You're going to become the 11th province. Well, that's not such a bad idea. You might want to consider that. No, but I mean, listen, that's what, as I said earlier, Megan, that was what really put the petrol on the flames of the tariffs. And that was the idea that we were under attack. And that we didn't know. I mean, is the 10th Mountain Division suddenly going to show up on Yonge Street in Toronto? Who knows? Initially that was the fear. And it hasn't fully gone away because we haven't yet. If you remember, Prime Minister Carney was in the Oval Office with Donald Trump, and the question was brought up, and Prime Minister Carney said, Mr. President, you're in real estate. You know that in real estate, some things are just not for sale, like the White House or Buckingham Palace, where you like to go. Well, same applies to Canada. We're not for sale, and we never will be for sale. And I think that, it didn't completely diffuse the situation, but at least one Canadian leader was looking at the president eyeball to eyeball and saying, no, you can't do this. Now, is the threat over? I don't know. We honestly don't know what the situation is. We have Canadians who we handle calls at our consulate all the time about Canadians saying, well, if I come down, should I get a burner phone if I, to cross the border? What can I expect? Am I going to be hauled off for questioning? These are overreactions, but nevertheless, this is the fear that is now among Canadians. We have worldwide conferences that are happening in places like Toronto and Vancouver where flights are being rerouted so nobody has to go through the United States because of the fear of some people from other parts of the world who are saying, well, I'm not sure that if I can get to Canada, that's not a problem. Coming back into the United States to go to Newark, well, Newark's a problem. But,
maybe not the best example.
Yeah, not the best example. But there is this fear. What am I gonna face if I come back into the United States? A lot of it is overblown. Let's be honest. But that is what's in the heads of people now. And once you bring up an existential threat to your country, you're not going to let that go very easily. You're not going to just wake up one day and go, oh yeah, no, that doesn't matter anymore. It's going to be at least a generation before Canadians come back to the trust that they had before.
So we've talked about Canada's relationship with the U.S., Mexico's relationship with the U.S., but let's talk about how Mexico and Canada are working together. How has this situation of turmoil impacted how Mexico and Canada might work together?
Well, as Consul Clark mentioned, Prime Minister and the President have agreed in the importance of strengthening our relationship precisely because we know that as North American partners, we are stronger if we are together.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that what's brought us together is a renewed sense that any agreement that we come to, and I'll repeat it, is going to be trilateral. We're not going to walk away from the Mexicans. They're our friends, they're our allies, and we're not going to throw them under any bus. One thing I will just point out, sort of refers to your previous question, Megan, how are Canadians reacting? Very quick thing. Next week, I think it is, next week, you may not know this, but King Charles is the King of Canada. He's not the King of England. He's the King of Canada. Constitutionally, he is our head of state. For the first time since 1977, he is coming to read the speech from the throne, which is the beginning of the government session. And this is highly symbolic and very, very deliberate that we have invited the king. And the king is very happy to come over to make a statement. Just by his presence, that makes a statement. The other thing I would say is that when Prime Minister Carney was first elected only a month or 2 months ago, the first trip he made when he first left Canadian soil was first to Paris, then to London, and then to the Arctic. And that, again, was symbolic. So we're fighting back with our own identity and foreshadowing where we want to go next.
And I thought you were going to say we have a lot more Canadians escaping the winter and going to Mexico.
Well, there will be.
And we're very happy with that, yeah.
So it's a World Affairs Council crowd, and we have a little bit of time for questions. And I know you won't disappoint me, but it's always tough getting the first one. So we're going to go here to Werner, and then we'll go over here. And then...
Thank you. My name is Werner Ollanadel. I work at the Connecticut General Assembly for a commission that is working on issues of equity and opportunity. My division is in Latino affairs. So I would love to get your perspective on how during his first term, President Trump signed the USMCA trade agreement and praised it as a big improvement over NAFTA. But more recently, he criticized the deal, saying it hurt the U.S. and even asked, and I quote him, "Who would sign something like this?" he asked, despite the fact that he signed it himself. So my question is, how do your governments handle that kind of contradiction, and how can then the two governments deal with the longer term trade agreements in the future when things like that happen?
May I? Yes. Okay, our Ministry of Economy used to be our Foreign Affairs Ministry. And so how do we deal? He takes a plane that same day, and he's sitting in Washington with the trade negotiators, and that has been working. It's negotiating, the same as Canadians have been doing it directly, either with the administration or with Congress, with the states that have so many interests. And we do hope that in next year's revision of USMCA will be a revision and not necessarily a renegotiation.
Very quickly, it's sort of like when the Toronto Maple Leafs face the Florida Panthers, and they can't figure out exactly what the Panthers are doing. The Panthers keep on scoring on us. That's how we deal with the White House. I think, in all seriousness, what we want to do is have a new agreement. We want to have an agreement that covers security and defense as well as trade. We want to marry all these things together. And we want to make sure that it's an agreement that actually is going to be respected and adhered to. One of the things that was said in the Oval Office that didn't get a lot of attention, but I picked up on, was when the president said, well, we got to redo the USMCA because it's not working. And the prime minister said, oh, I'm in complete agreement with you, sir, because you've put on tariffs. So obviously the USMCA is not working.
My name is Maria. I'm a student from Harvard High School. My question is, how are your countries working with the U.S. to make a border and immigration rules fair and safe for everyone?
I'll just jump in very quickly. I think that's a great question, and thank you for being here, by the way. It's great to see this type of engagement among the young. What we've got to do jointly is that we have, you know, they talk about, in defense terms, sort of a perimeter defense of North America. That's in defense terms. But maybe we should be pushing that out a little bit to talk about security terms as well. I mean, anybody who's a threat to the United States is a threat to Canada. And anybody who's a threat to Canada is a threat to the United States. So directly to what you're asking, how do we make it fair? I think what we do is we say, who do we want here, who do we not want here? What is that red line? Because there's no difference in terms of a threat to one country. A threat to one is a threat to all. So let's deal with that. So let's harmonize our security regulations in terms of immigration so that we know that we all know what the rules are and we can follow them.
So, so I know everyone in here has probably heard me say this, but just so you know, one of the longest standing programs that we've been doing since 1952 is our Model United Nations program, which now reaches over 1,200 Connecticut high school students. And so we are so happy to have them with us tonight, really engaging our future generation of leaders. So.
Brian Shackman I'm a local radio host. I won't mention the name of the station for respect to the building that I'm in. But I want to say two quick things. One is I want to thank the World Affairs Council. What a privilege it is to have this kind of conversation at this moment. So thank you. And I also want to mention to both Consul Generals that regardless of political party, and even a lot of people who think trade might have been unfair, I think a lot of people are really questioning why we're making enemies of our friends, right? So I think that's important I'm not speaking for people in this room, but in my orbit, that comes up a lot, where there's a lot, so we understand that dynamic. I want to ask a question about the border with Mexico. I think both sides of the political spectrum were unsure about what was really happening. And how can you explain why it's changed so much so fast? And why weren't there more dramatic actions taken sooner?
Well, as you know, I don't know if everyone knows, in last administration in the U.S., in trying to control the amount of people from South America, in particular Venezuela and Haiti and Cuba, they opened an app that was called CBP One. And so people could arrange their meeting with CBP officials in the U.S. in order to try to apply for refugee status. So it had been a big invitation for people from those countries to apply and come. So when this administration, the first day, they canceled CBP One, and now CBP One is only used to self-deport. Why were those actions not taken in last administration? Because they saw migration in a very different way. They considered that immigration was good for America, which is a country of immigrants always, and because the workforce in the U.S. needs needs all those people. So they thought that they could help those countries with the flow of people living there and help the U.S. economy. That is totally a different. That is not what this administration thinks about immigration. And so people stopped coming. The caravan stopped because they know they will not be accepted.
An observation, then a question. If the negotiators from Canada and Mexico understood the mad desire on the part of the president to win a Nobel Peace Prize and put in his mind the concept of a combination of defense, security, and trade as a new concept, he'll do it in a minute. Anyway, my question is, have either one of you seen any blue sky on this set of issues?
First question, I'm not sure that we would be part of the Nobel Committee that would give the president an award, but we will give him the Order of Canada. He's done more for our country in terms of unifying us than anybody has done in about 100 years. Blue sky, yeah, I think that, as Churchill said, it's always better to jaw than to war. And we're getting to the jaw stage here. And I think that, once we're getting rid of some of the noise and we're getting to the signal, which is important. So I think that there is progress being made. And I think that it really is important and this is my observation being around politics and leaders all of my life, personal relationships actually matter. If a leader likes another leader, or at least respects another leader, things can happen. And I think with President Sheinbaum in Mexico and Prime Minister Carney in Canada, I think that there is that level of respect that that can move us forward. So I'm seeing a little bit of blue right there.
What about in Mexico?
Yeah, the threat has been terrible, but we've seen that we sit and negotiate and talk, and things advance. So we do hope that we will continue being very good North American friends, neighbors, and allies.
And Chuck, Mr. Regan.
This is for Consul Clark. In terms of the Arctic defense in this current situation, what impact, if any, has it had on the NORAD, the North American Defense cooperation between Canada and the U.S. And isn't Greenland a part of that as well?
Excellent question, and thank you for bringing up the security and defense aspect. NORAD is the only binational command anywhere in the world. At any given time, there's a Canadian commander and a U.S. commander. And in fact, as part of NORAD, on 9/11, it was a group of Canadians in Troy, New York, that shut down North American airspace. We're deeply integrated on that front. I think that one of the aspects that we're going to realize out of these negotiations, but also the mood in Canada right now, is that we are about to spend vast new sums of money on defense. And by vast, I mean in the tens of billions of dollars. That's going to happen very quickly. We have already upgraded we've got a thing called over-the-hill radar. I think it's called it's over-the-hill something, rather. Or maybe they were talking about me, I'm not sure. But over the horizon, thank you, sir, very much. Over the horizon radar, which is very expensive and very groundbreaking in terms of doing it. Canada's paying for that for NORAD and installing that so that we have complete view of any threats to the airspace of North America. And I think that's only going to accelerate under the advanced spending that we're going to be doing on defense, getting up to 2%, getting up to the NATO 2%, and perhaps even beyond that if that's what NATO decides to do. But there is a turn in that way. But at the core of it, what we want to do is, we want to talk about expanding NORAD, the idea of North American defense. We want to expand it to maritime. It's not just air, it's maritime as well. And I think that we're making strides there already. And we're doing it, for example, in stuff that I can't go into too much detail about, but it's happening at ports, and there is stuff happening at ports now that wasn't happening 5-10 years ago. So it's moving ahead. Greenland is not part of NORAD. It is strictly a Canada-U.S. operation. But these days, we're keeping a very close eye on Greenland.
So many questions. Over here.
Alonso Velasquez, I'm from a Spanish language media outlet. The World Cup will be held next year in Canada, Mexico, and the US. And the question is how that event will impact the relationship between the three countries.
Well, we hope it will be a real, as it was thought originally, a very important opportunity to portray North America throughout the world. So Mexico's preparing with a lot of energy for that, and we'll be very happy hosting some of the games there.
I agree, and I think, it will be a model for North America to show how North America can work with three independent, sovereign countries with different histories, different geographies, but one purpose. And the real test will come when Canada wins the World Cup, just how loudly will America cheer in Mexico.
I think we have time for just one or two more questions. We'll go to Dan, and then I think we might have another student question.
Okay. My name is
Bob.
Bob Fishman. I'm on the board of the Connecticut Immigrant and Refugee Coalition, retired as their executive director. So about a year ago, we were talking how Canada did a good job in resettling Afghans and Ukrainians. And now that those doors are shut in the United States, can you tell us whether Canada is willing to increase those numbers of people who have been in the pipeline and help us out?
I wish I had a very specific answer to a specific question. I don't. What I do know is that while we're not reducing the number of refugee, which is what Ukrainians and Afghans would be, we are reducing overall our number of, especially foreign students coming in for not. We took in vast numbers over the past couple of years, and it had a very direct effect on things like housing and medical care. As you know, we have universal medical care in Canada. It had a direct effect on that. So we had to pull back on that. And while we're pulling back on that, however, we are not pulling back on our acceptance of refugees, legitimate refugee and asylum seekers. So I would imagine that's going to continue. I wish I could give you more specific on that, but I simply don't have that.
Thank you very much. My name's Dan Haar. I work for a news organization. I shouldn't name it out of respect for Brian. There's been a lot of talk as a corollary to this trade war situation of a flight to the gravitational pull of China. And I wonder whether that's just talk or whether you're starting to see it either in your two countries or among European partners and especially Asian as a result of the trade war, the sort of dysfunction with America, a flight to China.
Mexico has a good relationship with China, but it also knows that it has priorities, and the priority is our trade with North America. We have many trade agreements with Europe, with Latin America, with Japan, but we will continue our relationship of trade and with China, but it is not a special priority for Mexico right now.
Very quickly, in terms of Canada, we have a troubled relationship with China, as you know, after the arrest of the two Michaels and the outright execution of other Canadians in China, which were totally unjustified. We, however, view, and this gets a bit problematic to say, what's our greatest security threat? Let's put aside the U.S. problem for a moment. Our biggest security threat is China. And we are in lockstep with the United States. When the previous administration put a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs, within 36 hours we put a 100% tariff. We're very much on the same level. It's interesting, China has reached out to us to sort of say, hey, I hear you have trouble, down there. Why don't you come over and play with us? And we've said no, we're not going to do that. Our whole focus right now is on figuring out the United States. In the meantime, yes, we're trying to diversify trade, but we're trying to diversify it around the world, not necessarily to China. We're in Europe, we're Southeast Asia, we're opening up LNG terminals on the west coast of Canada to ship liquefied natural gas to places to shut down coal operations so that they can take natural gas. Critical minerals, again, we're doing offtakes with Europe and others. Our sphere is going to remain the free world sphere. So, yeah, no, China's not coming up very much.
So we've gone a little bit over, and I do want to make sure I give our guest speakers the last word in the last message. So we'll start with you, Consul General Fierro, and then we'll move to you, Consul General Clark. What message do you want to leave with us tonight? What message do you have for U.S. policymakers and for us, the citizens of the United States, the people sitting in the room? What do you want us to hear right now?
Well, first I want to thank you for the invitation. Thank you all for your patience and for being such a wonderful audience. And what I would want you all to think is, as I've said before, we are greater working together. We've been neighbors all the time since we became countries, and we have been very good partners. There's 1.5 million Americans that have chosen to live in Mexico permanently, and there are more than 40 million Americans visiting Mexico all the time. So that means we like each other, and we should continue working as neighbors, as friends, as allies with our Canadian friends.
Let me just echo what the Consul General said and thank you all for being such a great audience. Megan, thank you for conducting a terrific conversation this evening. It's wonderful to be able to have this chance for me to sit down with my Mexican counterpart in front of a group of extremely well-informed Americans. Final thoughts. When it comes to sovereignty, and again, let me quote Prime Minister Carney when he was on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. When he asked about, would you ever join the United States? And he said, no, you know what? We prefer being friends. Maybe friends with benefits, but we're not moving in with you. And I think that describes where we are. Look, Canadians and Americans are not just neighbors. I mean, it's not just geography that holds us together, and neither one of us, by the way, are going anywhere. I mean, the continental drift thing is not happening. We're not going to leave you. We're still going to be neighbors. But our families are intertwined, our businesses are intertwined, our cultures are intertwined. That's never going to change. And I think if I had to sort of sum up in line where we are, I'd say we kind of feel like we got punched in the nose by our very best friend. And we're trying to figure that out. But you know what? Once we figure it out, we want to go back to being your very best friend. We really do. I mean, yes, it's a moment in history. Yes, there's going to be consequences from this that are going to be long-lasting. But the essential bonds, which are the bonds between the people of these two countries, is going to exist for a very, very long time. And I think that in the process of reimagining North America, we also are stronger with our Mexican allies and friends in a way that might be seen eventually as being a positive thing. Right now, it's difficult. It's hard. And people are still angry. But that will change. And eventually what we've got to do, all of our tasks right now, is to figure out and reimagine when we get through this, what should that change look like? Where do we want to go? And you've all heard the expression, Wayne Gretzky said, well, it wasn't Wayne Gretzky who said it was Wayne Gretzky's father who said it. So I'm speaking for fathers all over the world right now. You always go where the puck's going to be, not where the puck is. And I think we're at that moment where we've got to figure out where the puck is going. Let's imagine getting there, and let's just get on with it.
Thank you. So when our council was founded in 1924, 101 years ago, it was because of conversations just like this. Because engaging in the world is so important. In engaging with our friends, our neighbors, our allies, and even those that aren't, is how we build a more peaceful and just world. And so I want to thank both of you who have been such great friends to the World Affairs Council of Connecticut and many of our other World Affairs Councils over the years. This has been such a delight and such an honor. So thank you so much. And please join me in thanking the Consuls General. I encourage everyone to remain engaged in your world and to join our World Affairs Council. If you're not a member, make sure that you're continuing to engage. These conversations are so critical to our world. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful night.